I'm a bad motherfucker.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's been quite a day already at the Jimmy Dore Show. Been quite a day. It's going to even get better. Watch this. We have our next guest with us. Dr. Merle Nass is a Maine-based physician and researcher who proved the world's largest anthrax epidemic was due to biological warfare. She also exposed the dangers of the anthrax vaccine. She is a COVID vaccine critic, and in 2022, her license was suspended. And she was told by the licensing agency that she had to undergo a neuropsych exam over her claim about the vaccines. Hey, by the way, AstraZeneca just retracted their vaccine after they admitted in court that it caused blood clotting. But anyway, welcome to the show,
Hey,
Dr. Merle Nass.
Thanks for inviting me.
So the reason I have you on today is that we wanted to talk about what's happening with the WHO. Now, we've tried to warn people at the WHO is literally, it's being run by a guy who's not even qualified. I think he's a veterinarian, and he is in bed with terrorists in Ethiopia, Tedros. So the WHO wants to take more control of your life. They're unelected, and they're funded by Bill Gates. The number one funder is Bill Gates. But here's an article from the Daily Caller, and it said exclusive state attorney generals push Biden not to hand over vast pandemic powers to the WHO. So, Dr. Ness, tell him what kind of powers is the WHO seeking to get, and why is it a problem?
So, what the WHO has proposed two different documents that together would give the Director General, who he's got a PhD in community health. He was the health minister and the foreign minister in Ethiopia when his organization was considered terrorist by the State Department.
Yes.
And he is accused of covering up 3 cholera epidemics that affected a rival tribe.
Right.
So that's who we've got. Not a very ethical gentleman.
So when I say he's not a doctor, you're saying he has a PhD, which is not a medical. He's not a medical doctor.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly. He's never treated a patient, but he'd like to treat 8 billion people who are on the planet, because the powers that the WHO is seeking would give him the right to declare pandemics or likely pandemics at any time for a number of reasons, not only necessarily health reasons, but ecosystem problems, animal or plant emergencies. He could declare any of those. And then he would have the right to tell everybody in the world what they needed to do or what they couldn't do. For example, he could mandate vaccinations. And the goal of the G20, the US, the EU, and the UN, and the World Bank is to roll out vaccines in 130 days, which is crazy because you can't test them in humans during that time. And it means we're going to get more dangerous vaccines. And they would like to remove liability from those vaccines, as they did for COVID. So basically, this would be legalizing the things that the entire COVID response, but only worse. It would be legalizing censorship, requiring nations to surveil their citizens' social media, and if they said anything that went against the WHO, it would have to be suppressed, censored. This would allow the WHO to create a library of what they call potential pandemic pathogens and what I call biological warfare agents, which the WHO would then share globally with universities, pharmaceutical companies, research centers, and others. They're really interested in proliferating agents that can cause pandemics in humans, animals, and plants. So figure that one out. It's a little hard to explain why you would want to do that unless you wanted to sell drugs and vaccines to deal with the pandemics that are going to ensue. There's more. They want to control supply chains. They want to be able to take supplies from one country and, send them to another without, the country agreeing. So it's quite an extraordinary power grab, and yet the U.S. government has been in favor of it and has been pushing it since day one.
So, why do you think the WHO wants this kind of power? I mean, first of all, let's talk about who controls the WHO. Now, I say that Bill Gates is the biggest donor to the WHO. Well, he donates through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and through Gavi, which is a vaccine distribution company that he founded, right? So it's I don't know if it's a nonprofit, but so here I think I have a graph. Here's the graph. So here's the top 20 contributors to the program budget for the WHO. This is from 2018. The number one is the United States of America, but right underneath that is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and then of course if you just go down a few more, there's Gavi. So it goes Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Britain, Germany, and then Gavi. So if you put these two together, he's the biggest donor. So it's being run by Bill Gates. So let's also remember we've showed the video on this show that the former head of the WHO said that they had to go out around the world and beg for money, and then whoever gave them money basically got to dictate what they got to do at the WHO. Well, Bill Gates is he's not a well-intentioned philanthropist like people think. He is a megalomaniac monopolist who's a cutthroat businessman, and he's always made hundreds of millions of dollars off of anything he's ever done. For instance, when right before COVID, he just happened to invest $55 million into Pfizer. And then he made $550 million off that $55 million in just a couple of years. And then he told everybody that the vaccine would stop transmission and contraction, and that everybody should take it, and that it's safe and effective. And then as soon as he cashed out his stock, he started telling people that the vaccine wasn't so good, that it didn't stop it wasn't good at infection blocking, and that the virus wasn't so deadly anyway. He said it turned out it had a low death rate, and it affected old people mostly like the flu. That's a direct quote from Bill Gates after he cashed out his stock. And so then he started saying we have to work on something called these nasal inhalers for the next pandemic. And these are good. They're infection blocking, as he was saying. And I looked up, he's funding that company that makes those nasal inhalers, of course. And so now Bill Gates is the guy who's basically controlling, because he controls the government in the United States, because the government in the United States is not there for we live in an oligarchy, and he's he's the richest guy in the world, I think. So he actually is the people controlling the government, handful of billionaires like Bill Gates. So Bill Gates controls the government. That's probably why the United States contributes so much to the WHO, because he tells them to. And then he's the second largest contributor, or maybe even the first, if you combine Bill and Melinda Gates with Gavi. And so now this guy who, by the way, I have just as good credentials dealing with pandemics and and biology and medicine. This guy, I actually have a college degree. He doesn't. Bill Gates is not a doctor. He's not a virologist. He's nothing. He's a college dropout, megalomaniac, monopolist, cutthroat businessman. That's what Bill Gates is, who owns the media. We've covered that here, right? And he owns the governments and now the WHO. So I just want to let people, because you meet people all the time. Bill Gates just wants to help. He wants to get rid of malaria. He wants to help people with vaccines. If you actually knew what Bill Gates was doing with vaccines, you would want him taken to The Hague. So they're going to get all this power. So the WHO is going to get power to declare a pandemic. And then when they declare that pandemic, they can then stop your movement, correct? They can then demand that you have to have a digital ID or a vaccine passport. They can mandate medicine. This is all these things. An unelected body, the WHO, run by a guy who's not even a doctor, who's in bed with terrorists, who's already been in many corrupt instances where he covered up outbreaks of diseases. This is who is going to be running your life, basically, in some kind of a dystopian, Brave New World. Am I wrong? Is that over? Am I being hyperbolic?
You got it. That's exactly right. And let me point out that Bill Gates also founded a charitable organization, in quotes, CEPI, Coalition for Epidemic Innovation, Preparedness and Innovation. And that's the organization that came up with this idea that we could roll out a vaccine in 130 days. He did that. He announced that with Jeremy Farrar at Davos in 2017. So that organization is also donating money to the WHO. And then I discovered there are other organizations like the Rotary Club. And the Rotary donates a lot to the WHO, but then Bill Gates donates quite a bit to the Rotary.
Ha! So there you go. So Bill Gates is the guy. So now he's the So, you know, when you see movies where there's a guy named Dr. Evil, that would be Bill Gates. So this guy, because but people think he's harmless because he looks like a nerd and he wears a crew neck sweater everywhere. So those nerds aren't bad people, are they? They're not evil. That's what evil looks like. And I'm not exaggerating. This isn't hyperbole. Bill Gates is an evil megalomaniac mental case who wants complete domination and control of the world, and he's getting it. And he's the richest man in the world. So he's getting it. And he's getting it through his funding of media, his funding of the Rotary Club, of the WHO, and his owning of the politicians in the United States. And so you're saying, so this article says that there's a bunch of state attorney generals that are telling Biden not to hand over the pandemic powers to the WHO. Now, do you think that'll actually have any effect?
I absolutely do. So let me just tell you, this is hot off the press. This happened within the last hour. So there have been states. My organization, Door to Freedom, has been working with activists in all the states, trying to pass legislation that will deny the WHO jurisdiction in their state. And we've also worked on trying to get the attorneys general, who are the top legal officer in each state. So because of the 10th Amendment, which says that any powers not specifically given to the federal government in the Constitution are reserved to the states or the people, that means healthcare, the regulation of healthcare, is reserved to the states. And so we thought it's time to point that out, that President Biden, who is ready to turn over U.S. healthcare and the control of U.S. information to the WHO, well, actually, you don't have the authority to do that because it's vested in the states. So we and the Sovereignty Coalition that I work with and others have been pounding the attorney generals, and they have come forward, and 22 of them, as of this afternoon, said, we are not going to carry out the WHO's orders in our states. So this is really big. The WHO is about to vote in 18 days on these two treaties that would give it these enormous powers. And by the United States pushing back, and by the way, we also had 49 senators. Every Republican senator has written a letter to Biden and co-sponsored a bill that denies jurisdiction, saying we don't want the WHO giving orders. This is a terrible thing. Stop negotiating these treaties. And they've also co-sponsored a bill that would require that these treaties go before the Senate to be ratified. And what that means is, with 49 senators on our side, ratification can't happen.
Because they need 2/3?
2/3 vote.
Right.
Yes. So yeah.
So I just wanted to show that this, I wanted to, the Vigilant Fox did a thread on this. A bunch, 49 senators led by Senator Ron Johnson has formally urged President Joe Biden to withdraw his support in expanding the World Health Organization's pandemic authority. They sent ahead of the 77th World Health Assembly scheduled for May 27th, as you just mentioned, to June 1st in Geneva, Switzerland. It argues that the WHO's mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis underscores the needs for major reforms rather than granting it more power. The senators warned that such an expansion could threaten U.S. sovereignty and constitutional rights, emphasizing that any international agreement enhancing WHO's authority should be treated as a treaty, which requires 2/3, a supermajority vote in the Senate for approval. So Here, this is the letter they sent, and I'll just read you some of it. They say that your administration is expected to commit the United States to 2 international agreements that would strengthen the WHO's authority to declare public health emergencies of international concern and expand the WHO's authority over member states during such emergencies. This is unacceptable, that the letter states. The WHO's failure during COVID-19 was as total as it was predictable and did lasting harm to our country. The United States cannot afford to ignore this latest WHO inability to perform its most basic function and must insist on comprehensive WHO reforms before even considering amendments to the international health regulations or any new pandemic-related treaty that would increase the WHO authority. We are deeply concerned that your administration continues to support these initiatives and strongly urge you to change course. Article 55 of the IHR requires the text of any IHR amendment to be communicated to member states at least 4 months before the WHA at which they are to be considered. So this is coming up, and they were supposed to have this 4 months ago. As the WHO has still not provided final amendment text to member states, we submit that the IHR amendments may not be considered at next month's WHA. Some of the over 300 proposals for amendments made by member states would substantially increase the WHO health emergency powers and constitute intolerable infringements upon U.S. sovereignty. As such, it was essential that the WHO abide by the 4-month notice period to allow member states time to ensure that no traces of such proposals were included in a final amendment package for consideration by the WHO. Having failed to do so, amendments are not in order. So what basically that says is that it says inside their own bylaws that if they want to give more, what they're going to do with these 2 treaties, give more power to the WHO, you have to send the text of those treaties to all the countries that are signing on to this 4 months ahead of time. Well, this meeting is taking place in just a couple of weeks, and they still haven't sent the text to anybody. So they're saying that invalidates your ability to even do this, which it should. And I'll go on a little bit more. The WHO's most recent publicly available draft of its new pandemic response treaty is dead on arrival. Instead of addressing the WHO's well-documented shortcomings, the treaty focuses on mandated resource and technology transfers, shredding intellectual property rights, infringing free speech, and supercharging the WHO. Now, moving forward with the new pandemic preparedness and response treaty ignores the fact that we are still unsure of COVID-19's origins because Beijing continues to block a legitimate independent investigation. We strongly urge you do not join any pandemic-related treaty, covenant, or agreement being considered at the 77th WHA. Should you ignore this advice, we state in the strongest possible terms that we consider any such agreement to be a treaty requiring the concurrence of 2/3 of the Senate under Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. In light of the high stakes for our country and our constitutional duty, we call upon you to, 1, withdraw your administration's support for the current IHR amendments and pandemic treaty negotiations, and 2, shift your administration's focus to comprehensive WHO reforms that address its persistent failures without expanding its authority, and 3, should you ignore these calls, submit any pandemic-related agreement to the Senate for its advice and consent. And there it is, and there's all of them signing it. So why do you think, so that's good news that at least 49 senators, all of them Republican, why do you think it's just Republicans? Aren't Republicans bought and sold by Bill Gates and big pharma and big tech, just like everybody else is? Why is it only Republicans and not a single Democrat or even an independent like Bernie Sanders, who's a big cuck to power?
Some of this is my fault and other people's fault.
I thought it was. I was going to blame you, but go ahead.
We saw the Republicans as an easier target, and we didn't realize that a small coterie of people could achieve what we have already. So what happened is there has been a total mainstream media blackout on this entire issue. And the WHO has basically been lying about what is in the documents. Well, how many members of Congress actually read these treaties? It'd be about 90 pages for them to read. They haven't read them. Instead, they've been given talking points, which are completely incorrect. And I know that because my readers have sent me letters they've received from their senators and congressmen around the country, and they're all full of essentially lies. The same lies were told by 3 administration officials who are negotiating these treaties to the single hearing that was held on the WHO. So the answer is they have no idea what's coming. It has been kept from them. And you have to, how many people get to sit down with a member of Congress or a senator and explain this to them and show them the actual documents? It's very hard. So we sort of ignored the Democrats and focused on the Republicans, and we've succeeded. And now we have to focus on the Democrats.
So it really is your fault. And no, this is amazing that you got this done. And so and you're saying the reason why there's not one single Democrat that signed on to this because you didn't focus on the Democrats, and you think
Correct.
you'll be able to get them.
Well, everybody, I've been in about 8 countries talking to parliamentarians. Everybody whom I show these documents to, and I have a PowerPoint with lots of screenshots from the actual treaties. When they see what's in these documents, they are so shocked, and they all wind up agreeing with us. I mean, who wants to turn over powers to run global healthcare to an organization that has basically failed at everything it's tried to do in terms of global healthcare? It's done poorly with the 2 largest Ebola epidemics in Africa. It called a level 6 pandemic in 2009 in order to trigger contracts for tens of billions of dollars of vaccines that nobody needed and that caused a lot of cases of narcolepsy. The WHO does not have a good track record. Any state in the United States probably has more expertise in infectious disease and emergencies than the WHO has. WHO has a $4 billion or less budget per year. For Bill Gates, it's a cheap date. 85% of the WHO budget comes from donations, not from dues. And 75% of what the WHO spends on programs is all directed by its donors. So the WHO is already a captured agency. It's no longer an agency that is the servant of the nation states. It's a private thing that happens to have the nation states on the side. And that's why we should never give them any authority to rule over us in any way. And Democrats would understand that just as well as Republicans, and I guess it's time now I started sitting down with them if I can get those appointments.
Well, what do you consider so when you talk about, you show these PowerPoints, and when you show these PowerPoints to people, they all end up agreeing with you that we should not give this power to the WHO. What is like the scariest thing? What's the scariest thing for you inside those PowerPoints?
So for me, the scariest thing is the library of biological warfare agents that they want to proliferate. That is actually going against the Biological Weapons Convention. It's an invitation to lab leaks and disasters. For the pharmaceutical industry, the scariest thing for them is that the poorer nations, in order to go along with this, want some patent rights to be reduced. They don't want to have to pay top dollar for drugs and vaccines in the future. And they want to be able to make them themselves in their own countries. So for pharma has said some of these versions of the treaty are dead on arrival because of that. For some people, it's the fact that the WHO can just come into your country and say, okay, we're taking all the ventilators now because we need them in, Afghanistan. But for others, it is the control of information. I mean, you cannot have a democracy when information is controlled, and we're seeing that in the United States now and in the rest of the Western world. You know, I mean, the fact that no major media, no TV station, nobody will talk about these WHO documents and actually tell you what's in them. That's, you know,
Why is that?
we're not living in a democracy anymore.
So first of all, before I get you to explain that, go back to the bioweapons thing. So there's a part in these treaties that they want to approve that is going to somehow proliferate more of the kind of gain of function research that led to the COVID-19. Is that what you're saying? That they're actually proposing we do more of that as a bioweapons program?
So one recent version of the treaty that came out a couple of months ago did say that. It actually used the term gain of function and genetic engineering and said the WHO the Director General would appoint scientists who would supervise gain of function research. So one version of the treaty actually said that. Obviously, somebody made a mistake because in other versions, they've couched it in more vague language. One version said, if you're doing research that is involved with the pathogenicity or transmissibility of pathogens, then reduce the administrative impediments to that research.
Wow. Which was the exact opposite that what Barack Obama did. Is he actually put a block to that kind of research. And now I know, because of the work RFK Jr. has done, it was that Dr. Fauci actually went around that block. He funded the gain of function research, and which now the NIH even admits. Dr. Fauci did lie about funding that twice to Congress, but he'll never be prosecuted because he was lying at the behest of the people who own the Congress. So there's nobody there to prosecute him. And so what he did was he took that money, gave it to EcoHealth Alliance, which is a CIA cutout, and they gave that money to Wuhan Lab to continue the risky research that Barack Obama wanted to stop. And why did Barack Obama want to stop it? Because that risky research when they were doing in the United States, viruses kept escaping from the labs. And so that's kind of like part and parcel that goes along with this kind of research. And we also found out that Dr. Fauci didn't really work for the Congress. Who he really worked for was the Pentagon. He was the head of the bioweapons program for the Pentagon, DARPA, ever since 9/11. And which is why he was the highest paid person in all of government, even made more money than the president of the United States. But not really, because now Barack Obama's worth $80 million, which he got, by digging holes and paving roads and shoveling snows and mowing lawns. I'm sure that's how he made that $80 million. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He just got that money handed to him. Anyway, so you seem, should we be enthusiastic? Should I feel optimistic that we're going to stop the WHO takeover?
Like I said, anyone who finds out, like you have, what's actually in these treaties doesn't want it. I mean, absent Bill Gates. So I think that we've made enormous strides in educating the public, and we have a long way to go. But these two documents, 18 days heading into the meeting where they're to be voted on, and we don't have a final version of either one yet. I think a lot of countries are going to say the vote has to be delayed. And if the vote is delayed, that's going to give us probably at least 6 months to do more education. Now, in September, let me warn everybody, the United Nations is trying to get something similar passed. They want an emergency. They want the UN General Assembly to vote to allow the Secretary General of the UN to have an emergency platform where he would then be able to declare emergencies of all types. Also, pandemic emergencies, biowarfare emergencies, emergencies in outer space, black swan emergencies, climate change emergencies, supply chain emergencies. And then the Secretary General would be able to tell the nations what they have to do. So that's what we see ahead. They're having a meeting in September, and we're going to have to, educate everybody about what's going on there. But for now, I think I think we have the WHO, I hope, in retreat. We do need to pass, there's 2 bills in Congress. One is in the Senate, one in the House, S-444 and H.R. 1425. And they are the bills that will require Joe Biden to put these treaties in front of the Senate. So that it's very important to get them passed and to get your member or your senator on board with this, especially if they're a Democrat.
So why I don't if it's already required by the Constitution that any treaty like this requires a 2/3 vote in the Senate, why do they have to pass bills to get the president to follow what's already in the Constitution?
Because the United States doesn't follow the Constitution, and actually we haven't for 200 years. So we've been signing treaties without the Senate approval, as I said, for over 200 years. And nowadays, it's like 2% of the treaties go in front of the Senate, and the rest are signed off by somebody in the State Department or the president, and they go forward.
And that's called fast track approval, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, they're going to fast track this. Just like warp speed the vaccine, fast track the treaty. So all those are is shortcuts around democracy. That's what those are.
Absolutely.
The people who say you have to vote for them to save democracy have been undermining, skirting, and going around democracy for at least 200 years. So is there anything else? Well, first of all, great work. I really appreciate you're out there doing this work, and I'm happy to help raise awareness about what's actually happening. I've seen just the only other place I've seen anyone talk about this is Dr. John Campbell's show on YouTube. He's the only one who's actually brings this stuff up. He still won't acknowledge I exist, but it does that hurts my feelings, but I'll get over it. But but what I like is that Dr. John Campbell's Wikipedia page now looks just as bad as mine. So maybe
that's funny.
Yeah, that is very funny. So maybe he'll reconsider and decide to actually come on our show and talk to us about things. But who knows? Maybe not. Maybe he's afraid to get too much of the stink on me on him. But he's already stinkier than me. So too bad. That's what happens, John, when you start telling the truth. They start threatening your license. They get the intelligence community to write smear pieces about you in Wikipedia. Your Wikipedia page looks like garbage. It starts off with a conspiracy theory, and then it gets worse from there. So, yeah. So, and are you surprised, by the way, you have been a medical doctor, and you had your license taken away over you speaking out over the COVID vaccines. Are you surprised at how few doctors have their license taken away? Meaning, are you surprised at how compliant doctors are and how little they'll push back against the establishment?
Yes. Yes. I was shocked and dismayed at how little the people who are supposed to guard our health were willing to do it. But when you look at what happened to me, I was just a poster child. The system needed to take a doctor, at least one, and make them national news. The day after my license was suspended, and I have to say, for nothing, essentially, I never had a patient complaint, and I still don't. So nobody alleges I harmed anybody, but still my license was suspended. And that, the fact that the system needs poster children to scare all the other doctors is impressive. There were a lot of doctors, thousands, I think, whose licenses were threatened, but there were only a few they actually took them away, like mine, because a medical license is worth a lot of money, and it's also worth a lot of prestige. And the way you look at yourself as a doctor. If you lose your license and you've been a doctor and all of a sudden you've got to dig dishes or work in the supermarket, that a lot of people commit suicide when that happens. And so the system knows they're going to face lawsuits. They're going to face a lot of publicity if they actually take the license. So instead they threaten people, and that basically was enough to keep a lot of people quiet. It's where this is I believe this whole thing is about global governance. I think this was the first basically skirmish in the global governance war, which is a soft coup, designed to occur without any bullets being fired, and will go from one thing to another. So there's a lot at stake, and that is why I believe the system, has thrown so many resources at winning at the WHO, winning at the UN, forcing so many nations not to allow the use of hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, forcing people to take remdesivir. This is part of a scheme to see what they can get away with, how hard do they have to press, and can they get everybody to stay in line? Can the price that you have to pay for fighting back be so high that people will stay in line? And so we've had the dress rehearsal with COVID, and now we're moving on to the show.
And what a dress rehearsal it was. It's the people who you would expect to stand up against these things, right? The people who always say they are anti-establishment and truth tellers, and people who say they were silent. And then other people, like for instance Cornel West, who always says he stands with the oppressed and he stands with workers, didn't say a goddamn thing during COVID when they were firing and threatening, and 70,000 healthcare workers in one state alone fired because they wouldn't take an experimental medical treatment. He said nothing at all. And not only that, he shamed people who did, people like me. And so that's because, and that revealed him to be an establishment tool of the highest order, and all that stuff he's been saying all his years is just bullshit, because the time came for people like Cornel West to stand up for workers and students and children, and he didn't, and he still won't do it. So he is a controlled tool of the establishment, and a willing one. With, he told me when he came on the show that we live in two different worlds. We certainly do. I live in the world of the vaccine injured and blue collar workers, and he comes from ivory towers and bullshitters and servants to the establishment, which is what he is. So isn't it shocking to you? I would thought if there was be one guy that would stand up during COVID, it would have been him. And again, so it turns out he was just a phony this whole time. He's a phony, because whenever he could have did something against the establishment, they didn't, said nothing. Pulitzer Prize writers that I admire have still, to this day, silent about lockdowns and the lies about natural immunity, the lies about herd immunity, the lies about transmission, contraction, the lies about the origin of the virus, the lies about everything, closing schools. They're silent on it. Pulitzer Prize winners, silent, don't have the balls of a YouTuber. What a disgusting display it is. And so I'm really grateful for people like you willing to risk your medical license to stand up against this. I was willing to risk my channel. They came for me. They gave me a community strike. They took down 5 of my videos, although I was right. And now people are running around like Chris Cuomo, trying to say that he doesn't apologize for telling people that they were crazy for not getting a vaccine or for resisting a mandate, and that he doesn't apologize for it because we didn't know any better at the time. Well, I knew better at the time, but he didn't want to know better, right? And so right. They all pretend like this information wasn't available in 2021. Well, it certainly was. It was on my channel. Dr. Robert Malone came on, and he talked about how it was a leaky vaccine, how you can't vaccinate your way out of this pandemic, and this was the wrong way to handle it. And that got over almost 800,000 views. So at least 800,000 people who watch a dumb comedian on YouTube knew that before Chris Cuomo, Mr. CNN, knew it. Anyway, you can tell this really gets me worked up, this topic. Because it really exposes everything that's wrong with culture, our society, our news media, our government, and people's personal relations, right? I come from comedy where you're supposed to question everything, and the top comedians in the country shamed people for questioning authority, which is the exact opposite of what comedians are supposed to do. You're supposed to shame people for following rules without questioning. And if you're shaming people for questioning authority and not following rules, you're not doing comedy, you're doing propaganda. And it turned out most of the comedians that I know and respected are just big propagandists. Anyway, I could go on and on and on. And anything else you'd like to add to this?
I want to say that I totally agree with you. I think, what COVID revealed is that the people who want to make a global government and want to control everybody have done a great job over the last few decades of letting everybody know, if you step out of line once, you're finished. Your career will not go up in the trajectory you had hoped. And, I saw that in medicine. I've seen it in academia. And so, and I've seen it in the media. So journalists, all the good investigative journalists are gone, right? They were not allowed to continue to write the truth. They were told what they had to, the narratives they had to put forth. And so we've basically populated all of our professional institutions with yes men and women. And, how are we going to get over that? We need to create a society where, honesty and perseverance and all that are valued, but they haven't been valued. And I'd say at least in the last 20 years in the US, and maybe longer. That decade when greed was good was not a good thing.
Yes, I remember that. That was from the movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas. Greed is good. Everybody, I was at meetings, people said that. Anyway, well, listen, Dr. Merrill Nass, thank you for doing the work you're doing. Thanks for sticking your chin out. Please come back on the show and keep us updated on the global takeover by the WHO and your efforts to fight back against it. You're doing it looks like you're doing great work, and you're having a lot of success, and people owe you a lot, but they don't know it. But we'll try to inform them of it. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay, let's go to a break and we'll be right back.
Okay, give me just 1 second just to refresh.
Go to
stand
Steph.
by. Yeah, and then thank you so much. That was a great interview today, Jimmy. Really powerful. All right, so you already know you're making your move over to Rumble, ladies and gentlemen. And my team, we can go ahead and move on over to Rumble. We'll be right back. Let's go to a card.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit
Isn't it swell? The memes make themselves. They found a rabbi hole, tunnels and all. There's Jews in the walls. Isn't it bliss? The rabbinical soiling the mattresses. Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate shitty coffee? I, for one, really hate shitty coffee, which is why I'm excited to introduce to you a company that's revolting against shitty coffee, and it's called the 1775 Coffee Company. Now, I haven't had it yet because I only drink decaf. Steph has had it. Steph, how do you like it?
I really like it. You know what? I have a French press, and so I've been using my French press and totally enjoying it. It's delicious. It's smooth. It's smooth.
So 1775, the world in 1775, the world awakened to a new era. And now it's 1775 Coffee Company is bringing you a coffee that embodies that revolutionary spirit. Crafted with passion and precision, our beans are ethically and exclusively sourced from the finest coffee beans farms of Bolivia. Didn't know that. 1775 Coffee Company's farm-to-cup journey ensures the highest quality of authenticity and sustainability from start to finish. With each sip, your palate will recognize and appreciate the dedication and passion that goes into crafting this single-sourced brew. 1775 Coffee Company takes pride in offering customers a truly exceptional coffee experience with their premium coffee collection. But their dedication to this revolution extends beyond the realm of taste. Safeguarding freedom of speech is critical right now, which is why 1775 Coffee Company has joined forces with Rumble in defense of one of our most fundamental rights, freedom of speech. Coffee that's sure to awaken all your senses, including the sense of freedom. So choose 1775 Coffee by going to 1775coffee.com/litter. That's LITTER, and use the code LITTER for 10% off the checkout on your first order. 1775 Coffee, brewed to perfection, crafted with revolution.